beach that I'm going to be fishing for a few hours this morning, and as you can see, it is very, very rocky, and those rocks extend well out into the sea, so it would be totally impossible for me to bait fish there and cast my bait into the rocks. I might get lucky and hit a little clear patch, but more than likely I'm just going to get snagged every single time. But I can fish this, and the way I can fish it is just to the edge of the rocks, just in this area where I am here. It's clean, there's a clear area to the furthest distance that I can cast, and then it goes reefy again. So that means that I'm able to place a bait out very, very close to the rocks, and hopefully if there's any bass moving in to feed over the rocks as the tide floods in, they'll get attracted by the scent of my bait and we might get lucky. Now it's about half hour before low water, and I'm going to fish the first 2 or 3 hours of the flooding tide. Now rather than fish down on the beach here, if it was a big spring tide, I could get down on the beach and fish off the beach, but I can't today. So what I'm doing, I'm going to fish off this rocky ledge here and then cast out onto that clean area as close as I can to the rocks, and then of course as the tide comes in I can just back up on these rocks and just carry on fishing. Might be a little bit difficult to land a fish, but there are some little areas that I've looked at where if I do catch a fish that I can guide the fish into and land it. The tackle I'm using, I've got a bass rod here. This is a 12-foot 2 to 4 ounce bass rod, and on that I've got a 6,000 size fixed spool reel. I also use multipliers. In fact, I prefer a multiplier, but sometimes when you're filming it's less complicated to use a fixed spool because there's less chance of overruns, and I haven't got the time this morning to deal with overruns. So we've got a fixed spool, and on that I've got 15-pound mono, and then joined to the end of the mono I've got a shock leader. It's a 30-pound shock leader, which is twice the length of the rod and a couple of turns around the reel. Now I don't need a heavy shock leader. 30 pounds is more than enough for two reasons. One, I don't need to try and blast it out far, and the other is I don't need heavy leads here. I'm only going to be fishing a 3 ounce grip lead, so there's no need for a heavy shock leader. Now the rig I'm using is an absolutely ideal rig to use when you're fishing anywhere near rocks, anywhere near rough ground, and that is the well-known Pennell pulley rig. So I've got it clipped, it's got a clip at the end of the shock leader there to easily clip the rig on, and then coming down from that I've got about 3 foot of 30-pound amnesia with a breakaway imp down the bottom there, so I can clip the bait down to keep it streamlined when casting. Not that I need to cast great distances, but it just helps in keep the bait together when you're casting. 3 ounce breakaway lead, and then the trace to the hook, 30-pound amnesia, clear amnesia, to 2 hooks, Pennell rig, and I've got 2 quite large hooks here. I've got 2 5/0 Varivas big mouth hooks. Now the Pennell rig is ideal for bass fishing, particularly when you're going to be fishing quite big baits, and normally if I go bass fishing I'll always fish a fairly big bait, and it just gives that double hooking power, and there's a hook at whichever end that the bass decides to pick up the bait. So that's the rig, and as I said, ideal rig for these conditions. The bait I've got with me today is razor clam. Now of course there's plenty of good baits you can use when you go bass fishing. Peeler crab, fantastic bait, lugworm, ragworm, sand eel, mackerel strip, squid. All will take bass. If the bass are there and feeding, they will take it. But I've got razor clam. It's a fantastic bait, got a huge amount of scent it gives out, and very convenient that I have it in my freezer. I can just take it out and off I go fishing. So what I've done, I've taken the meat out of the shell, cut it straight in half. Sometimes if it's not a very big razor clam, I'll use the whole one, just double it up. But I've cut this in half and doubled up, and then so we've got a nice thick bait, and then first bound it well with bait elastic, and by doing that it makes it very, very easy to thread on the hook, which we'll have a look at later. Like I said, loads of scent in this bait. You can see all the juices that have oozed out of it when I bound it with elastic. It is a great bait. Right, now for the baiting up. So we take out a nice big lump of razor clam, and then I'm just going to thread it on the hook, exactly the same as if it was a worm. So the hook comes out the end, and there's plenty of hook point exposed. And then just take the panel hook, bring that down, just wrap it round the line about 3 times, and then nick it through the end. So like I said, whichever end the bass comes and takes that bait, we've got plenty of places that it can get hooked. The other thing about using the panel rig, that it helps to keep the bait in place when you're casting. Stop it shooting up the line, which sometimes happens when you use a clip down rig. Put a bit of force in the cast, it can shoot up the line, and if you're using a flapper, it comes the other way, it bunches down a bit. So it helps it to keep it nicely presented in the water like that. So what I'll do to finish it off is then take a bit more bait elastic and then just bind it a little bit more to the hook. Just finish it off with a bit of a knot. Right, it's about low water now, and I'm ready to start fishing. The good news about today, there's a little bit of movement in the water, as you can see. It's not a big surf, but there is a bit of a swell coming in. Even though there's absolutely no wind, I've actually got a bit of an offshore wind. But that's good news, that there's a bit of movement in the water. What I'm going to do when I put this in the tripod here is just I'm loosening the drag off, just in case we get a good fish come and pick up the bait. I don't want the whole of this going over the rock here and into the drink. We're into something. Whether it's a bass or not, of course I won't know yet. Great bite, the rod just went over. Now the biggest problem I've got is off of these rocks here is actually manoeuvring this fish. It's taken me the way that I want it to take me. Yeah, it is a bass. You can normally tell you get that. They sort of kite sideways. Right. And we got it. It's not big. Right, just get this bass in and then we'll have a look at it. Well, it's only a small bass, it's an undersized bass, so I'm going to get this back straight away, but we'll have a quick look at it. Right, we'll get it back. Yep, that's gone away lovely, I'm pleased to say. Well, that was the only bass of that session, but I've come back down to give it another try. And there's a big difference between this session and the last session. And that is, it's been blowing very, very strong winds the last couple of days and very, very strong overnight. And the water at the upper shoreline here is absolutely filthy. It's very, very brown and very coloured. Therefore, it's had a real stir up. Got a big swell coming in, and I'm just waiting actually for that swell to die down a bit as the tide goes back. It's a bit too much of a swell at the moment for me to fish or go anywhere near the water, but hopefully that will settle down and I'll be able to start fishing. The other difference today is that I've got a different bait with me today. Another very convenient bait that I find is great just to keep them in the freezer and go out and have them ready for when you want to go out for your session. And that's sand eel, frozen sand eel. Another great bait for bass, and of course very much a natural bait for bass. And don't ever be put off by using frozen sand eel for bass. As long as it's of a decent quality, it will take bass, and I've caught an awful lot of bass with frozen sand eel over the years. So I'm going to be fishing a couple of hours of the ebb tide today. It's about mid-ebb tide and then a couple of hours down towards low water. And hopefully this big stir up would have brought one or two more bass in, and I can at least catch one slightly bigger bass. Right, we're in. No, I dropped it. Dropped it. Well, that's it. I've come to the end of my session and I've got to get on in. And it looks like I lost my opportunity today. I felt the fish just for a few seconds and then it dropped it and it was gone. Might not have been a bass, of course, could have been something else, could have been a bull husk, could have been a ray or whatever, I'll never know. But that's the way it goes with bass fishing. You sometimes get these short windows of opportunity, and sometimes you get them and sometimes you don't, and sometimes they're good fish and sometimes they're small fish. That's the way it is, and it can be a frustrating, dedicated pursuit. But this series is ongoing, and hopefully I'll be able to get another session in before the end of the year. But it will carry on, of course, into next year with a variety of beach fishing, rocky beach fishing like this, or open sandy beach fishing, surf fishing, maybe some fishing after dark, both lure fishing and bait fishing. And there'll be the successes and there'll be the failures like today. That's just the way it is. So once again, I hope you found that useful, and many, many thanks for watching.